There are two types of people. The first talks about living with purpose constantly. They share the quotes, buy the journals, sign up for the seminars, and can name every productivity method trending that month. And yet, 12 months later, their life looks almost identical to where it started. Then there is the second type. They rarely talk about it at all. No announcements, no aesthetically arranged morning routines posted online. But something about the way they move through their days is different, quieter, more grounded. Like they made a decision somewhere along the way that most people never quite make. The difference between these two groups is not talent, not luck, and not motivation. It comes down to 7 small, unglamorous daily habits that compound silently over time. In this video, I will show you exactly what those habits are, why the simplest one is the hardest to start, and what it genuinely looks like to stop talking about purpose and start living it. Think about the first thing you do every morning, before your feet hit the floor, before the coffee is on, before a single conscious decision has been made. For most people, the answer is the same: the phone. Within 60 seconds of waking, they are already inside someone else's world, reading someone else's news, reacting to someone else's emergency, processing someone else's opinion. And just like that, the most valuable mental window of the entire day is gone before it was ever used. Here is what neuroscience has confirmed about the morning brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for focus, decision-making, and intentional thinking, is at its least contaminated state right after waking. It has not yet been pulled in 12 directions. It has not yet accumulated the cognitive residue of other people's demands. That window is real, it is limited, and most people spend it reacting instead of initiating. People who live with genuine intention have learned to protect that window. Not by following an elaborate 5-step morning routine or waking before sunrise with military precision. The habit is simpler and quieter than that. They create a buffer, 20 minutes, sometimes 30, where the outside world does not yet exist. Maybe they sit with their coffee and actually taste it. Maybe they stretch, or look out the window, or simply let their mind arrive at the day before the day arrives at them. The specific activity matters far less than the principle behind it. They choose how their morning begins rather than allowing it to be chosen for them. This is not about rejecting technology or pretending notifications don't exist. It is about understanding something that most people learn too late. How you spend the first 30 minutes of your day sets the emotional and cognitive tone for everything that follows. When you begin by consuming other people's thoughts, urgencies, and reactions, you have already handed away your clearest thinking before a single priority of your own has been considered. You start the day one step behind and you spend the rest of it trying to catch up. Brian Tracy, after decades studying the habits of high performers, observed that successful people think about their goals consistently, not just occasionally. But that kind of sustained clarity requires a starting point. You cannot build focus on a foundation of noise. The morning is where that foundation is either laid or lost. What is the very first thing you reach for when you wake up tomorrow? And more importantly, does it belong to your life or to someone else's? Because the day you answer that question honestly is usually the day something quietly begins to shift. But clearing that space only matters if you use it well. That is where the second habit comes in. Most people have a complicated relationship with their own thoughts. They think constantly, but rarely clearly. The same worries loop. The same questions go unanswered. The same doubts resurface every few weeks wearing slightly different clothes. And the reason is simple. Unwritten thoughts have no edges. They expand, contract, and repeat without resolution. The mind is not designed to organize itself through thinking alone. It needs a different tool. That tool is writing, not for an audience, not for a platform, not to perform insight or signal growth to anyone watching. Just words on a page that nobody else will ever read. People who live with genuine intention write regularly, and the writing they protect most fiercely is the kind done entirely for themselves. A private journal, a notebook kept in a drawer, a document on a phone that has never been shared and never will be. The format does not matter. What matters is the absence of an audience, because the moment you write for someone else, you stop exploring and start performing. You begin editing before the thought is even finished. You produce the version of yourself you want others to see, rather than the one that actually exists. Research on expressive writing supports what intentional people have discovered through practice. Writing about thoughts and experiences increases psychological clarity, reduces mental rumination, and improves the ability to make decisions aligned with personal values. The act of translating internal experience into language forces the brain to organize what was previously scattered. Thinking loops, writing resolves. The practice does not require inspiration or perfect conditions. Some days produce a genuine insight worth returning to. Most days produce messy, half-formed observations that feel almost pointless in the moment, but those pages still serve their purpose. They reveal patterns, what you return to again and again, what you consistently avoid, what you genuinely care about beneath the noise of expectations and social comparison. Over time, that private record becomes a mirror that shows you who you actually are, not who you are trying to be. Brian Tracy once noted that Aristotle believed 95% of everything a person does is the result of habit. Writing without an audience is how you audit the habits you never consciously chose. It is where you notice the gap between the life you are describing and the one you are actually living. When was the last time you wrote something that no one else was ever going to read? Not a caption, not a message, not a reply. Something entirely your own. Because clarity that stays locked inside the mind stays locked. But attention is a different kind of problem, and that is exactly where most people lose the day without realizing it. There is a phrase that has quietly become one of the most expensive lies in modern life. Just checking quickly. You have said it. Everyone has. One glance at the phone to see if anything urgent came in. One quick scroll while the coffee brews. One brief detour into the inbox before getting back to what actually mattered. And then, somehow, 20 minutes have passed. The task you were building momentum on has gone cold. The thread of focus you were holding has snapped. And the process of rebuilding it costs more than most people realize. Cognitive science calls this attention residue. When you switch from one task to another, even briefly, part of your attention remains stuck on what you just left. The distraction ends, but its weight lingers. Researchers at the University of California found that after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to the original task at full cognitive capacity. 23 minutes for one quick check. People who live with genuine intention understand something most people only discover too late. Attention is not just a productivity tool, it is the raw material of a purposeful life. Every meaningful thing you build, every relationship you deepen, every goal you move toward requires sustained, uninterrupted attention at some point. When that attention is constantly fragmented, the life built from it reflects that fragmentation. Scattered days become scattered years. So, intentional people guard it differently. They use airplane mode not as a dramatic gesture, but as a practical boundary. They delete applications that consistently pull them toward distraction without providing anything of real value. They schedule specific windows for checking messages rather than remaining permanently available to whoever happens to reach out. They do not rely on willpower to resist the pull because they understand that willpower depletes. Instead, they restructure the environment so that the distraction is simply not there to resist. Brian Tracy spent decades studying high performers and found that results-oriented people consistently ask themselves one question throughout the day. What is the most important thing I can do right now to move toward my most important goal? That question requires focus. It cannot be answered from inside a notification. It requires the kind of sustained mental presence that a fragmented attention span cannot produce. Here is what intentional people have discovered through their own technology breaks. The world does not fall apart when they are unreachable for 2 hours. The urgent messages almost never were. The breaking news changed nothing about their actual lives. But the mental space they reclaimed in that time changed everything. How many times have you checked your phone in the last hour? And was a single one of those moments truly necessary? Your attention belongs to you. The question is whether you are spending it or letting it be taken. At some point, exercise became another item on the optimization checklist, something to be completed efficiently, ideally while doing something else. Headphones in, podcast playing, heart rate tracked, calories logged, all before the mind has even registered that the body moved at all. The workout happened, the presence did not. And most people have stopped noticing the difference. Watch how intentional people approach movement, and you will see something immediately distinct. They are not necessarily exercising more or harder. They are exercising differently. At least once each day, they move without filling the experience with something else. No audio, no screen, no mental planning session disguised as a walk. Just the body moving through space and the quiet that comes with paying attention to it. This is not about fitness performance or reaching a particular physical standard. The research on mindful movement, which combines physical activity with present moment awareness, shows benefits that extend well beyond the physical. Studies published in journals on behavioral medicine have found that walking without distraction reduces cortisol levels, improves mood regulation, and increases what psychologists call interoceptive awareness, which is simply the ability to notice and respond to what is happening inside the body. That awareness, built through movement, transfers directly into how a person navigates the rest of the day. Because here is the deeper truth that intentional people understand. How you inhabit your body reflects how you inhabit your life. If you cannot be present during a 30-minute walk, something simple and entirely within your control, you will not suddenly become present for the conversations, decisions, and moments that carry real weight. Presence is not a switch you flip when things become important. It is a capacity you either develop or allow to atrophy. Brian Tracy identified health orientation as one of the foundational habits of high performers, not as vanity, but as energy management. A deliberate life demands more than most people realize: focus, patience, creativity, emotional steadiness. All of these are downstream of physical well-being. You cannot sustain intention on a depleted system. The body is not separate from the purposeful life. It is the vehicle it runs through. Whether it is walking, swimming, stretching, or simply moving through the kitchen in a way that is unhurried and unscripted, the habit is the same. One moment each day where you are fully inside your body rather than somewhere above it, planning the next thing. When was the last time you moved without anything in your ears or your hands, and actually noticed what that felt like? The body slows down before the mind does, and once both are quiet, a very different kind of clarity becomes possible. That is where the fifth habit lives. There is a trade most people make without realizing they are making it. Yes to the last-minute plan means no to the evening of rest the body was asking for. Yes to one more commitment at work means no to the focused hour that actually mattered. Yes to the scroll means no to the book, the walk, the quiet, or whatever else was waiting on the other side of that decision. Every yes carries a hidden no. Intentional people see both sides of that equation simultaneously. Most people only see the yes. The fear of missing out is real, well documented, and extraordinarily effective at steering people away from their own priorities. Social psychologists have studied how the mere perception of others having rewarding experiences triggers anxiety and impulsive decision-making. The result is a life shaped more by what other people are doing than by any genuine internal compass. Busyness becomes the default. Overcommitment becomes the norm. And at the end of a full and exhausting day, there is the quiet, uncomfortable sense that none of it quite added up to anything meaningful. Intentional people have made a different calculation. They have learned, usually through experience rather than theory, that protecting their time requires the willingness to disappoint occasionally. They decline invitations without elaborate justifications. They turn down opportunities that look impressive on the surface but do not align with what they are actually building. They say no to the request that would stretch them past the point of doing anything well. And they do this not from selfishness, but from a clear-eyed understanding of what a yes actually costs. Brian Tracy spent decades observing high performers and found one consistent pattern. Before starting any work, they set priorities. They asked themselves which single task, if completed, would move them furthest toward their most important goal. That question only has power if the day has space to answer it. A schedule filled entirely with other people's yeses leaves no room for your own most important work. But intentional people extend this further than time management. They say no to mental commitments too. No to the news cycle that generates anxiety without producing useful information. No to the habit of comparing their progress to others whose full story they will never know. No to carrying emotional weight that belongs to someone else's situation, not their own. The boundary is internal as much as external. What have you said yes to recently that was quietly a no to something that mattered more to you? Because once you begin protecting that space, something interesting happens. The gaps that open up are not empty. They become useful. And the sixth habit is entirely about what intentional people do inside them. Most people have a distorted image of what stillness looks like. They picture a dedicated room, a meditation cushion, a specific hour carved out of the day with near monastic discipline. And because that version feels unrealistic, they conclude that stillness is simply not available to them. So, the gaps in the day, those small unclaimed pockets between one thing and the next, get filled immediately. The phone comes out. The podcast resumes. The next task begins before the last one has fully settled. The day becomes a continuous stream with no natural pauses, and the person moving through it arrives at the evening wondering why they feel so far from themselves. Intentional people have discovered something that meditation research has been confirming for years. The benefits of stillness do not require long sessions or perfect conditions. They accumulate through micro moments, brief, deliberate pauses scattered throughout the day that ask nothing more than a few seconds of genuine presence. Waiting for the coffee to brew, sitting at a red light without reaching for the phone, the pause before responding to a message that deserves a considered reply, the moment between finishing one task and beginning the next. These gaps exist in every day. The difference is whether they are used or immediately buried. Psychologists studying attention restoration theory have found that even short breaks from cognitive stimulation, as brief as 40 to 60 seconds of unfocused awareness, can measurably restore mental clarity and reduce decision fatigue. The brain is not designed for continuous input. It processes, consolidates, and resets when given the permission to do so. Micro moments of stillness are not wasted time. They are the maintenance that keeps everything else functioning. But there is something else that happens in those pauses that goes beyond cognitive recovery. You begin to notice where tension has quietly accumulated without your awareness, a tightness that has been there for hours, a worry that has been running in the background without being acknowledged, a sense of drift from whatever you had intended the day to be. Stillness surfaces what busyness buries. Brian Tracy observed that successful people think about their goals not just in the morning, but continuously throughout the day. In the car, between meetings, in quiet moments. That sustained orientation is what keeps choices aligned with priorities. Micro pauses are where that realignment happens naturally, without force. When you finish this video, before you move to whatever comes next, try doing nothing for 30 seconds. No phone, no planning, no filling the space. Just notice what is already there, because the way intentional people end the day is just as deliberate as how they move through it. And that final habit might be the most overlooked of all. The way most people end their day is not really an ending at all. They scroll until the eyes give out. They fall into sleep mid-sentence, mid-video, mid-thought, carrying the full, unprocessed weight of everything that happened from morning onward. There is no closure, no transition, just consciousness fading into whatever comes next. And then the alarm sounds, and it all begins again, with yesterday's residue still quietly present, shaping the mood of a day that has not even started. Intentional people do something different, not elaborate or time-consuming. A simple closing ritual that takes 5 minutes at most. A quiet moment at the end of the day to ask one honest question before letting it go. Did I live today in a way that felt true? Not whether the day was productive by someone else's measure, not whether every task was completed or every goal advanced. Just that one question, asked with honesty and without the sharp edge of self-criticism. The distinction between reflection and judgment is everything here. Reflection asks what happened and what it meant. Judgment decides what it says about your worth. Intentional people practice the first and consciously refuse the second. They look at the day clearly, acknowledge what worked and what did not, and then release it. Not because they are indifferent to growth, but because they understand that tomorrow cannot be built well from the wreckage of an unprocessed yesterday. Research on what psychologists call the reminiscence effect shows that brief structured reflection at the end of the day improves long-term memory consolidation, increases feelings of meaning, and reduces the kind of rumination that keeps people awake and anxious. Writing 3 sentences about the day, or simply sitting quietly and reviewing it without a phone in hand, produces measurable differences in how the brain categorizes and stores experience. The day closes properly. The mind follows. Brian Tracy identified self-discipline as the foundational habit beneath all other habits. The ability to do what you should do when you should do it, whether you feel like it or not. Its truest test is not the morning, when motivation is fresh. It is the evening, when the day has been long and the temptation to simply collapse is strong. The discipline to close honestly, even after a day that did not go as planned, is what separates those who gradually compound their growth from those who keep starting over. When you get into bed tonight, will you know whether today felt true? Or will you let it dissolve the same way it ended? Because the answer to that question, asked every night with honesty and without judgment, is where a purposeful life is quietly assembled, one closed day at a time. None of these 7 habits will trend. They are not dramatic enough to share, not aesthetic enough to post, and not fast enough to feel like progress in the moment. That is precisely what makes them work. Purpose is not built in the announcement. It is built in the quiet repetition of small, honest acts that nobody else sees. Brian Tracy said it simply: good habits are hard to form, but easy to live with. The resistance is always at the beginning. Start the morning before the noise. Write without an audience. Guard your attention. Move with presence. Say no to what pulls you away from what matters. Find stillness in the gaps. Close the day with honesty. Do that consistently, and the life on the other side of those habits becomes unrecognizable from the one that existed before them. You do not need all 7. Start with 1. If this video helped you, subscribe. More like this is coming.